My name is Sylvia Hartman. I am 68, a retired school librarian who still alphabetizes spices when the night will not sleep. The morning the call came, steam rose from my chamomile tea. My phone trembled against the oak table. I answered because I was raised to. Mom, start packing. The house is sold. Nathan did not say hello. I looked at the teacup Samuel gave me on our 10th anniversary. White porcelain with a blue rim, a small chip shaped like a crescent. I set it down so the saucer would not ring. Good morning to you too, Nathan. He inhaled. I am making this easy, he said. You cannot stay there alone. Claire and I found a buyer. Be ready. I smiled at the window, not at the voice. The suitcase by the hallway closet had been there since Tuesday, but it did not hold the things he imagined. I had already packed. They were not my boxes. Under the bed were cartons labeled with my son's name and my daughter-in-law's name. Trophies, yearbooks, the punch bowl that never held punch. I had arranged their past for delivery back to them. I had kept my future off their checklist. After my husband's funeral, I never mentioned the second house or the money he left me. On a note tucked in my recipe book, Samuel had written the plain truth. After my husband's funeral, I never mentioned the second house or the $840,000 he left me. I read the figure, pressed the paper flat so my hands would steady. Keep this for yourself. When they are loud, be quiet. In the church hall, casseroles cooled while condolences overran the air. Claire held my elbow as if guiding me across a street. Her voice took that careful register people use when they negotiate in the name of care. We need to think practical, she whispered near the lilies. Taxes, safety, location. You would be happier with us. Nathan shook hands like a man at a conference. When the pastor closed the book, I held the teacup I had hidden in my bag instead of a handkerchief. Now, at my kitchen table, I traced the rim of the cup. Nathan, I said, who signed a contract on a house that is not theirs to sell. He laughed in that short way that used to be mine before I learned what it breaks. Mom, please, do not make this hard. He spoke over his impatience. We will move you into our finished basement. It has a full bath. Claire knows a contractor who can add a small kitchen. I looked at the stove where Samuel once set a kettle and said, "Let it sing. Rushing ruins tea. Imagination can be a room." I stepped into mine. A key waited on a hook by a window that faces the Atlantic. The house on the main bluff. Cedar shingles. Salt on the breeze. A table, for one. Samuel left directions in a lawyer's envelope under the loose drawer bottom. I found it the day after the black suits left our porch. Nathan, I said, what is the buyer's name? He paused. Paper rustled. Greg, something. That is not your concern. I let silence sit until it grew heavy enough to be seen. Then listen closely, I said, and kept my voice kind. Kindness is my spine. After my husband's funeral, I never mentioned the second house or the $840,000 he left me. A week later, you told me to start packing because the house was sold. I smiled. I had already packed, but they were not my boxes. He exhaled through his teeth. What are you saying? I tasted the cooled tea. It held the slight bitterness of oversteeped comfort. I am saying I will not move because you scheduled my life, I said. I am saying I will choose where I sleep. In my head, I could hear the thumbnail words people would read if I told this story. After my husband's funeral, I never mentioned the second house or the $840,000 he left me. A week later, My son said, "Start packing. The house is sold." I smiled. I had already packed, but they were not my boxes. "Nathan," I said, "come by Sunday. We will have pie. Bring Lily. Leave the paperwork at home." I ended the call. I lifted the teacup, the chip pressed against my finger, a small, honest moon. I breathed, and the room held. I was ready. When the front door closes behind your last guest after a funeral, the silence is not peace. It is a new sound you have to learn. I moved through the house like a stranger, touching the backs of chairs, the cool brass doorknobs, the banister Samuel polished every spring. The air still carried the faint mix of his aftershave and the lemon oil we used on the floors. This was the house we had built a life in, room by room, year by year. Now each room felt like a framed photograph I had stepped into without the people who gave it color. The mornings were the hardest. I would stand in the kitchen, teacup in hand, watching sunlight hit the counter where Samuel used to slice bread. Even the clock above the stove seemed hesitant, ticking like it was waiting for permission. I told myself I would take small steps, water the plants, sweep the porch, write thank you notes for flowers that had already wilted. Nathan and Claire came by on a Tuesday, the kind of day that looks harmless. I saw them from the window, Nathan's stride purposeful, Claire's arm looped through his. They entered with that practiced tone people reserve for hospital visits. Half pity, half performance. "Hi, Mom," Nathan said, drawing out the hi like I might break if it came too fast. Claire scanned the hallway while smiling at me, her eyes moving from the grandfather clock to the silver-framed wedding photo, to the crystal bowl Samuel's sister had given us. I could almost hear her adding numbers. "I brought you some soup," she said, setting a plastic container on the counter as though it might anchor the conversation in kindness. I thanked her. We all knew it wasn't about the soup. The thump of sneakers on the hardwood broke the moment. "Grandma!" Lily's voice was sunlight through a crack. She ran into the kitchen, arms wide, and I bent to meet her hug. She smelled faintly of apples and the shampoo her mother used. Her eyes landed on the teacup by the stove, the one with the blue rim and the crescent chip. "Is that the cup Grandpa gave you?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yes, it is," I said, turning it so the chip faced her. "He said every good cup should have one flaw, so you know it's yours." She smiled like she was tucking the thought away for later. Nathan cleared his throat, the signal for a change of subject. "Mom, we've been thinking. This place, it's a lot to manage. The upkeep, the taxes. You shouldn't have to worry about all that." I didn't answer right away. I had learned the value of letting silence do its work. Claire stepped in, her voice warm but pointed. "We have plenty of space. The basement is finished. Full bathroom. Room for a little kitchen if you want. You'd have privacy, but you'd be close to us. Safe, comfortable, convenient." I let her words hang between us like laundry on a cold line. She was careful, never saying sell the house outright, but every syllable leaned in that direction. Nathan nodded as if to add weight. "It's just practical, Mom. You deserve that." I looked around the kitchen. The ceramic tile Samuel had chosen because it felt like summer under bare feet. The oak table where we'd balanced checkbooks and cooled pies. The window above the sink, framing the maple tree we'd planted when Nathan was born. Every corner whispered a piece of my life, not theirs. "Thank you for thinking of me," I said, meeting Claire's eyes. "That's a generous offer." It was the truth, in the narrow sense that generosity can also be self-interest in disguise. Lily was tracing the pattern on the teacup with her finger, oblivious to the undercurrent. Claire smiled, pleased to hear a thank you. Nathan's shoulders eased, misreading my tone. They thought they were moving the conversation toward their goal. In that moment, I knew they had no idea there was a whole other map in my mind, one with coastlines and cedar walls and the smell of the ocean at night. I poured tea into the chipped cup, the steam rising between us like a curtain. It's something to consider, I said. And I meant it. I would consider, just not in the way they imagined. They saw an aging woman in a too-large house. I saw the edge of a bluff in Maine and the key that was already mine. Nathan checked his watch. Claire adjusted her scarf, and Lily leaned against me, holding the cup carefully as if it were made of light. The house didn't feel smaller in their presence, but it did feel different, like it was reminding me it still belonged to me. The next visit came only 3 days later. Nathan arrived alone this time, carrying a folder tucked under his arm the way Samuel used to carry the morning paper. He sat at the kitchen table without asking, spreading out sheets that caught the light from the window, property tax statements, repair estimates, insurance bills. The numbers glared up at me, black and certain. "Mom, look at this," he said, tapping a column with his finger. "The taxes have gone up another 12% this year, and that's before you even think about maintenance. The roof needs work, the driveway's cracked, the heating system's outdated. If you stay here, you'll be pouring money into a place that's just going to keep taking from you." I nodded slowly, my hands folded in my lap. He spoke with the efficiency of someone closing a deal, not opening a conversation. "I'm just worried about you," he added, softening his tone. "This place is too big, too much for you to handle alone. You deserve somewhere safe, where you don't have to lift a finger." Inside, I could feel the quiet truth rising like a tide. When people want something, they often wrap it in paper labeled concern. And concern, in its prettiest form, can still be a lock on a door you never wanted closed. I watched his face as he waited for me to answer. He had Samuel's jawline, but the rest was Claire, measured, careful, already imagining the next step once this one landed. I sipped my tea instead of speaking, letting the warmth settle in my chest. Silence can be a mirror, and I let him see himself in it. My eyes drifted to the maple tree outside, its branches bending in the autumn wind, and suddenly I was somewhere else. Another fall, years ago. Samuel and I had been sitting on this very porch, wrapped in blankets as we watched the leaves spin down. He'd been quiet for a while, then turned to me with that steady gaze that never needed to be loud to be heard. "Promise me something," he said. "If I go first, don't let anyone decide your life for you. Not even Nathan, especially not Nathan if he's under pressure from someone else. You've got a good heart, Syl, but you give it away too easily. Keep something for yourself." I had laughed then, half in protest. "Nathan's our boy. He wouldn't—" Samuel shook his head gently. "It's not about malice. It's about need. People will convince themselves they're helping you when they're really helping themselves. And you'll want to believe them, because it's easier than saying no. Don't make it easy." The memory was as sharp as the edge of the table beneath my fingertips. He had known this day would come in some form, even if neither of us could name it then. Nathan leaned forward now, misreading my silence as uncertainty. "Mom, think about the winters here. If you slipped on the ice, who would find you? And if something happens to the heating system, how would you manage? I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because I love you." Love. A word that can feel like an open hand or a closed fist, depending on how it's used. I looked at him and saw both possibilities. I thought of Samuel's voice in my ear, low and certain. Don't make it easy. You've put a lot of thought into this, I said at last. I appreciate that. My words were true, but incomplete. What I didn't say was that my thoughts were moving in an entirely different direction, one that led not to their basement, but to the cedar deck of a house they didn't know existed. Nathan relaxed, the way people do when they think they've planted a seed. He gathered his papers, sliding them back into the folder like a magician putting away a trick he'd already decided was finished. Just think about it, okay? I'll check back in a few days. As he stood to leave, I stayed seated, my palm resting on the warm wood of the table. Outside, the maple's leaves scattered across the lawn, spinning in the wind before settling exactly where they chose. When the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I whispered to the empty room, not for the first time. I'm thinking, Samuel, and I promise I won't make it easy. That night, after the house had settled into its familiar creaks and sighs, I found myself drawn to Samuel's old study. I hadn't stepped inside much since the funeral. The air still carried his scent, a faint blend of cedar and the pipe tobacco he'd never quite given up. Moonlight pooled on the floorboards, glinting off the brass handles of his desk. The desk had always been his command center. Every drawer was organized in a way that only made sense to him. I pulled open the top right drawer, expecting the usual: pens, notepads, a stray paperclip or two. Instead, my fingers brushed against something thicker than paper. It was a yellow envelope, the color softened with age, sealed but not taped shut. My heart tightened when I saw the handwriting. It was Samuel's, steady, deliberate strokes. Across the front, he'd written, "If they push you, don't play by their rules." For a long moment, I just held it. My hands were trembling, but my mind felt suddenly clear, as if the fog of the last week had lifted all at once. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the contents with care, the way you'd lift a fragile bird from a nest. The first item was a property deed. My breath caught when I saw the location: Camden, Maine. I knew the town. We'd visited once in early summer, when the harbor was dotted with sailboats, and the air smelled of salt and pine. The address was a 2-story cedar-shingled house perched above the shoreline, a place Samuel had described then as where the land sighs into the sea. The second item was a bank statement from an account I'd never seen before. The balance made my pulse skip: $840,000. My name stood alone on the account. No co-signers, no shared access. The third was a single sheet of paper with a short list, written in Samuel's careful hand. At the top, "Call Margaret." Underneath was a main phone number and the words, "She knows what to do." Margaret. I hadn't thought about her in years. She was an old friend of Samuel's from his Navy days, a woman with eyes like polished stone and a laugh that could carry over the sound of the tide. I remembered her once telling me, "When Sam makes a plan, he makes it for every weather." I set the papers on the desk and sat back, my fingers still curled from where they'd been gripping the envelope. My hands were shaking, but inside, something steadier was taking root. In that moment, I understood that Samuel had anticipated all of this: Nathan's polite insistence, Claire's calculating charm, the gentle but relentless pressure to fold myself into their plans. He'd seen it coming, And instead of warning me in vague terms, he'd left me tools. I traced the letters of his handwriting with the tip of my finger. There was nothing romantic or sentimental in these instructions. They were crisp, actionable. Samuel hadn't just wanted to protect me. He wanted to make sure I could stand without leaning on anyone who might one day decide I was a burden. My mind drifted back to a conversation we'd had in the same room years before. I'd been fretting about a dispute with a neighbor, unsure whether to confront them or let it go. Samuel had listened quietly, then said, "If you play by their rules, you'll lose. If you play by your own, you can't be beaten, because you'll be the only one keeping score." I didn't realize then that he was giving me a philosophy I'd need much later. The clock on the wall ticked, steady and unhurried. Outside, a wind picked up, rattling the window panes. I imagined the house in Maine, its windows facing the open water, the waves striking the rocks in a rhythm older than any of us. I gathered the papers and tucked them back into the envelope, holding it to my chest for a moment before placing it in my own desk drawer. It was no longer just a packet of documents. It was a compass, a reminder that I was not as cornered as Nathan and Claire might believe. As I turned off the light and closed the study door, a strange calm settled over me. The fear that had been nipping at my heels since Samuel's funeral eased its grip. I wasn't trapped. I had choices. And Samuel, even in death, had given me the quiet means to exercise them. I went to bed that night with the envelope on the nightstand beside me. Not hidden, but kept close, like a talisman. My hands might still tremble, but my mind was unshakable now. I whispered into the dark, "I hear you, Sam. I won't play by their rules." The next morning, I called the number Samuel left. Margaret answered on the second ring. We met that afternoon in a brick building that used to be a bank. The lobby still wore a vault door like a medal. She greeted me with a firm nod and a seat by the window. "Let me see what he left," she said, and I slid the yellow envelope across the polished table. She opened it with the care of someone disarming a story. Deed first, then the bank statement, then Samuel's note. She read quickly, nothing hurried. "This house in Camden is yours outright," she said, tapping the deed. "Title in your sole name, no liens, taxes current. The account is yours as well. No joint authorization, no transfer on death add-ons. If anyone suggests you lack authority over either, they are wrong in law and mistaken in nerve." Plain words calmed me more than the numbers. I nodded. She studied my face like a skipper reading weather. "I expect pressure," I said. "Nathan brings lists. Claire brings concern dressed as comfort." "Then we will make our own list," she replied, writing. "First, letters to any realtor or buyer who was told your home is for sale. It is not. Without your written consent, they must cease contact with family and route any inquiry through me. Second, a memorandum that you have granted no power of attorney. Claims to the contrary are fraudulent. Third, we record a notice with the county so no one can pretend confusion." I exhaled. Relief lived inside the word record. "And the Camden house?" I asked. "Should it stay quiet?" "For now," she said. "We will form a trust with a name that sounds like a filing cabinet. After I verify chain of title in Maine, we retitle the property to it. Mail comes through my office. You decide who learns what and when." The room felt a degree cooler. My thoughts could move. "Nathan mentioned conservatorship," I said. "He couched it as love." "Judges prefer facts," she said. "You are lucid. You manage your affairs. You can repeat your birth date and address. You can recite the last 4 digits on the account you just showed me. If anyone files a petition, we respond with affidavits, a physician's letter if you wish, and recordings of any threats. We do not posture, we document. I laughed once. Air found a window. Samuel used to say paper is a lighthouse. He was right, she said, and silence is sometimes the sharpest knife. You do not have to argue. You decline in writing. She slid a blank legal pad toward me. Tell me what you want, not what you fear. I wrote slowly, the pen heavier than it looked. I want to remain in my home until I decide otherwise. I want my son to stop treating my no as a phase. I want my granddaughter to learn that love does not require handing over your keys. I want to stand where I choose. Margaret read and nodded. Good. Those are boundaries. Courts respect boundaries more than complaints. She drafted letters. The scratch of her pen was clean and fast. She handed me copies, each signed. What about the money? I asked. Should I move it? Not all at once, she said. Open a credit union account under your sole control. Move a portion there. Freeze your credit as a precaution. Use a post office box for any mail about these changes. Quiet steps. No announcements. I pictured the blue-rimmed teacup on my counter, the way Lily traced its chip like a shoreline. I can do that. She softened. Samuel thought like a navigator, she said. He chose you because you are the harbor. Do not mistake gentleness for weakness. Truth rose from my chest to my throat. I nodded so I would not cry. Thank you, I said, for not making me feel foolish. You are not foolish, she said. You are grieving and competent. Those can live together. We stood. She returned the envelope to me, heavier now that another mind had carried it. At the door, she paused. If Nathan calls, offer pie. Offer time. Use the tone a good parent uses with a child who should know better. Do not offer the deed. Outside, late sun lit the vault door. It gleamed like a quiet promise. I stepped into the cool, folded the letters into my bag, and felt my shoulders settle. The wind smelled of riverstone and dry leaves. I could hear Samuel again, not as a ghost, but as a sentence finally finished. I took the long way home so the feeling would last. The map ahead felt simple and mine. I walked slowly, homeward. The following afternoon, the gravel in my driveway announced them before the bell could. Nathan walked in carrying a leather folder and a pen. Claire followed with a casserole, a prop to make business look like care. I met them at the kitchen doorway and motioned toward the table. The blue-rimmed teacup waited where morning had left it. The kettle was already humming. Rain ticked on the awning. I did not. Thanks for seeing us, Nathan said, laying out pages. This is straightforward. A cash offer above market, 30-day close. You will not have to lift a finger. The buyer is flexible about your move-out date if you need, but the sooner the better. All I need is your signature. I poured tea into 3 cups. Steam rose between us. Sugar? I asked. No, thank you, Claire said. But please read the offer. Greg says the buyer will handle closing costs. That saves you thousands. We can put the proceeds straight into something safe, and Lily's tuition is due in August. Nathan tapped a page. Here are the numbers. Taxes, insurance refunds, net to you. We can get you set up downstairs by next weekend. I have already talked to the contractor. I set a small plate of lemon cookies on the table. I listened. I let their plans fill the room. Then I put the lid on. I slid the top document back toward Nathan with 2 fingers. No. The single syllable landed like a stone in water. Silence spread. Nathan's jaw flexed. Claire's smile thinned. Mom, he said, keeping his voice level, I know you think you are being careful, but this is the responsible choice. The roof alone. I know what the roof costs, I said gently. I remember every shingle. Claire leaned forward, elbows near the papers. We are not trying to take anything from you. We want to keep you safe, and Lily needs stability. Tuition is not a small thing. She is a good student. She deserves a clear path. I thought of Lily's fingers tracing the chip in my teacup, the way children study small imperfections to learn what love looks like up close. Lily deserves many things, I said. She does not deserve to be a leaver. Nathan's patience cracked. Why are you making this hard? We have done the legwork. All you have to do is sign. Because signing is a kind of vanishing, I thought. A way of stepping out of your own door and letting someone else lock it behind you. Aloud, I kept my tone even. I appreciate the preparation. I am not selling. He pushed the pen toward me, a little too fast. Then at least initial the intent. It shows good faith. My good faith is not for sale, I said, and pushed the pen back to the center of the table so it would stop pointing at me. Claire's eyes softened. If you will not do it for yourself, do it for family. Lily's program is competitive. Early deposits guarantee her place. Imagine how proud Grandpa would be. I folded my hands to keep them from shaking at the name. Your father would be proudest if Lily learned to stand on her own feet. Pride and dependence are not the same lesson. Nathan gathered the papers, then spread them again, as if rearrangement could change their meaning. You are not hearing us. I am hearing you, I said. You want me small enough to fit the space you cleared out for me. I will not be smaller than my life. Silence deepened. The kettle clicked off. A car passed outside and left us to our breathing. Claire tried once more, softer. We cannot pay for everything on our own. It is honest to say that, I replied. It is not honest to pretend this offer is only about helping me. Nathan stood. The chair legs scraped. This is unbelievable. No, I said. It is a boundary. I rose, collected the teacups, and carried them to the sink. You may stay for pie on Sunday. Bring Lily. Leave the contracts at home. He stared at my back as if the bones there were a locked door. Claire touched his sleeve. Let's go, she whispered. At the doorway, he turned. This is not over. It is not, I agreed, but the part where I sign is. They left with their casserole and their folder, and the house exhaled. I washed the blue-rimmed cup last, set it to dry where the light could find it, and felt the steadiness that comes when a person chooses their own weight. The next day, I waited for the phone to ring. It did after lunch. Nathan's name flashed across the screen. I let it buzz twice, then answered and walked to the sink where the blue-rimmed cup was drying in a square of sun. Mom, I talked to Greg again, he said. The buyer wants an answer. We could lose this number if we stall. I did not argue. I rinsed the cup. Water threaded the chip like a small river learning its bed. Nathan, I asked, when was the last time you called me without mentioning money? He went quiet, the kind of quiet that shuffles papers. This is not about money. This is about safety, about doing the smart thing. I let the word safety pass through the open window. Answer the question, I said, calm as a calendar. When did you last call just to ask how the garden is, how my knees are, what book I am reading? He changed lanes. Claire made a list of the things you should not be lifting. She worries. Lily worries. What if you fall on the stairs? I hear the worry. I said. I would like to hear a hello that is not shaped like an invoice. His pride bristled. I felt it through the line like static before a storm. You think I am using you, he said. You think I am some kind of accountant who only sees columns. I think you are under pressure, I replied. Pressure can make a good son sound like a landlord. I let silence settle after that. It set like plaster, taking the impression of both our faces. He coughed, regrouped. Anyway, if you insist on staying, we need to plan for maintenance. The heating system, the roof, the driveway. I can get quotes. You could, I said. Or you could bring Lily by Sunday like I asked. Pie at 2. He heard the dismissal inside the invitation and hated the shape of it. Fine, he said. We will come. He hung up too quickly. I set the cup back on the towel and stood there, listening to the new sound the house made. Not grief, not relief, something truer than both. I thought about the question I had put in his path and the way he had stepped around it. I thought about the cost of love when love becomes a ledger. Here is the part that pricks the heart. Some of you wonder if I should help. Sign, sell, smooth the road. A mother's open hand is a story this country tells itself. We measure women by how much they give up. I have lived that measurement. I wore it like an apron for 40 years. I am done letting it wipe other people's mouths. I would help Lily with tuition. I already do. I would help Nathan if he brought me truth instead of tactics. But help is not the same as surrender. Support does not require surrendering the key to your own door. If I handed over the deed today, the lesson I would teach my granddaughter is that love erases boundaries. I want a different lesson for her, that love respects a boundary the way the sea respects a lighthouse, by not pretending it is a dock. In the afternoon, Claire texted a campus brochure, bright lawns, careful smiles. Imagine Lily here, she wrote. Imagine how proud Samuel would be. I stared at the message, then put the phone face down. Pride is not a scholarship. Grief is not a signature. I walked to the mailbox and slid in the certified letters Margaret prepared. Paper moved outward like a tide with my name on it. Some choices feel like thunder. This one arrived, like tide, steady and undeniable to me. Evening folded in with the scent of rain and cut grass. I made soup. I ate in the quiet. I washed the spoon. The house did not shrink or grow. It held. I wrote in my notebook a single line I could return to when doubt looked like kindness, wearing new clothes. Do not trade a lifetime for a weekend of peace. Before bed, I called Lily. We spoke about a science project, about the cat that keeps visiting their porch, about the way the maple leaves look like small hands. She did not ask about money. I did not bring it up. When she said goodnight, I pressed the phone to my heart, then set it down. The room felt steady. The silence, for once, was mine. The morning after that quiet call, I opened my notebook and wrote 3 verbs: call, gather, change. I dialed the Camden number Margaret gave me. A woman answered on the second ring, voice steady as a buoy. Ruth McKenna, she said. I told her my name, the road, the cedar shingles, the view that looks past the pines to a strip of gray sea. She did not ask who else knew. Samuel said you might call one day, she replied. I will air the rooms, flush the lines, set fresh linens. Do you want groceries delivered before you arrive? Yes, I said. Tea, bread, lemons, a small jar of honey. Saying the list felt like laying a hand on a future and finding it warm. Ruth took notes without fuss. I will leave the key in the iron box by the stoop. The code will be the month you were married. We agreed on a day for her to visit the house and start the work that turns emptiness into shelter. When we hung up, I spread a towel on the kitchen table and laid out what would travel. Passports, copies of deeds and letters, the contact sheet Margaret typed, a credit union card in my name only, the new post office box key. I added the small tin of sandalwood balm Samuel loved. Scent is a key the mind remembers when courage forgets its way. I carried everything to the bedroom closet where the wall safe sits behind a framed lighthouse. The safe door swung on familiar hinges. I set a travel folder on the top shelf. Beneath it, I placed a home folder with warranties and a clean list of subscriptions to cancel with dates. I made a third packet and wrote contingency across the flap. It held a letter to Lily, sealed in my neat script. It said only what she needs to grow upright, that love does not ask you to surrender your name. I placed the contingency packet deeper in the safe, turned the dial, and breathed until the tumblers agreed with me. Paper moved quietly. My spine moved with it. On the kitchen table, I arranged two objects side by side so my next choices would stare me down. The blue-rimmed teacup, the brass key to the main door, Margaret couriered in a plain envelope, porcelain and metal, past and next, both mine. The chip held a sliver of light. The key returned a steady glint. I stood there longer than the kettle needed to sing. In the utility drawer, I found the lock set I bought last, winter and never installed. The box was plain, stamped with tidy diagrams. I carried it to the front door and set my tools on the mat. Phillips screwdriver, flathead, needle nose pliers, a small dish for screws, a drop of oil for threads that pretend to be stubborn. Late light slid across the floor and lifted the dust like small birds. I told the house what I was doing. You are mine. I am keeping you safe. I slowed everything the way Samuel taught me to thread a fishhook without fear. First, I turned the deadbolt and watched the throw slide clean. Then I loosened the faceplate screws, each one easing with a soft complaint. Brass has a smell when it warms under your hands, part earth, part storm. I removed the old cylinder and held it in my palm, heavier than it looked, the way a habit is. On the sill, a new barrel waited, bright and patient. I seated it, aligned the tailpiece with the slot, and tightened until the plate met the wood, without pride. Outside, the maple answered the wind like water. I swapped the strike plate and set the screws, then checked the throw again. Smooth in, smooth out. I whispered thank you to the door for holding. Thank you to my hands for learning. The last step was the knob cylinder. I tightened each screw until the face sat flat, then tested the key. 1 turn. 2. The bolt slid and returned like breath practiced in a mirror. I wrote the new key code on a card and tucked it behind my driver's license. I gathered the old hardware and put it in a paper bag marked Donate. Some things do not need a landfill. They can work again on a door that never learned my name. Back at the table, I set the teacup beside the main key again, not in the safe this time, but where the window could find them. A small, private ceremony, proof that choosing can be quiet and still be law. Night gathered clean and slow. I locked the door with the new key. It turned with quiet authority. In the dark glass, my reflection held steady, the way a lighthouse keeps its beam when nobody is watching. I carried the key to the bedroom, placed it on the nightstand, and slid the teacup beside it. 2 small sentries, one for home, one for horizon. I slept easily for the first time in weeks at last. Morning brought rain and my son. Nathan rang the bell and waited. I opened the door and led him to the kitchen. Blue-rimmed cup sat in its square of light. The kettle began to murmur. He set a folder on the table and kept one hand on it. "We need to resolve this," he said. "You are not listening to reason. If you refuse to act in your own interest, there are other avenues. Courts exist for a reason." "Sit," I said. "Tea." He did not sit. "Mom, I am talking about capacity, about responsibility. There are legal mechanisms when a parent cannot manage finances. Conservatorships protect people who will not accept help." I set my phone in the center of the table, screen up, recording open. "Repeat that," I said, clearly. His eyes went to the phone. "Why are you making this adversarial?" "I am keeping a record," I said. "Clarity helps everyone." He straightened as if giving testimony. "If you continue to be unreasonable, I will consult counsel to begin a conservatorship petition." He paused, then rushed the rest. "It is for your safety." I poured tea. Steam rose. Silence cooled. "Thank you," I said. "Now hear me." I tapped the letters from Margaret beside the napkin holder, the county stamp dark. "My home is not listed. No one is authorized to solicit or negotiate a sale. I have granted no power of attorney. Any document to the contrary is fraudulent and will be treated as such." Nathan pulled out a chair then, not from respect, but because sitting gives a man something to do with the part of him that wants to pace. "You should not force me to do this," he said. "Claire is scared. Lily is not your argument," I said. "Lily is a child who loves her grandmother. Keep her out of this room." He looked away. "You are twisting everything. I am trying to keep you safe." I lifted the cup and took one slow sip. "You are trying to move me where I am easier to manage. That is not the same thing." His jaw worked. "You have a big house, aging systems, stairs, ice in winter. You could fall. You could be taken advantage of." "I could," I said. "Today I am not. Today you are here with papers that require my signature to make me smaller. I decline." He pointed at the phone. "Turn that off." "No," I said. "I would like to remember this exactly." Color rose along his collar. "I swear I will file." "You may file," I said. "A judge will ask if I can state the date, the name of the president, the location of my deeds, the balance of my accounts, the steps I have taken to secure maintenance. I will answer calmly. Then the judge will ask why your first plan involved a buyer before a conversation." He blinked. "We were trying to make it easy." "Easy for whom?" I asked. His mouth opened, then closed. I slid a slice of pie onto a plate and set it by his hand. "Eat," I said. "Sugar steadies foolish blood." He laughed once, bitter. "You think this is a game?" "No," I said. "This is a boundary. I do not shout. I do not beg. I do not sign. I will listen if you want to talk about Sunday afternoons and gardens and how Lily's project is going. I will not talk about selling my life." He stared at the tea, then at me. "So that is it." "That is it," I said. "You do not have to like it. You do have to respect it, or you can speak to Margaret instead of to me." He stood again, the chair legs scraping. "I will call her," he said. "Do," I replied. "She prefers email." At the door he paused, frustration moving across his face like weather. "It did not have to be like this," he said. "It did not," I agreed. "You could have started with hello." He looked as though he might say more, then reached for the knob. The new lock turned clean under his hand. The click sounded like a period. He left without slamming. I stopped the recording and saved it to a folder named For Clarity. The house was quiet enough to hear the clock breathe. I carried the phone to the bedroom and set it beside the main key and the blue-rimmed cup. 3 small witnesses: truth, choice, remembrance. I touched each one in turn. Then I went back to the kitchen, cut a second slice of pie, and set it where the light falls in mid-afternoon for the person I am practicing to be. I began early, before the sun reached the curtains. The house was quiet, except for the slow hum of the refrigerator and the occasional tick of the clock. I set 3 boxes on the dining table, sturdy ones I'd saved from the basement. They were clean, taped along the seams, ready to be filled. One by one, I went through the rooms. Nathan's old tennis racket, still leaning in the corner of the hall closet. A stack of sweaters Claire had left for me last winter, but never once wore. Cookbooks with her initials penciled inside the cover. All of it went into the boxes without pause. I wasn't angry. I was deliberate. Every item was something they had claimed as theirs, or left behind without care. I folded sweaters neatly, placed fragile items in layers of newspaper. Each time the box filled, I sealed it with thick brown tape and wrote in clear, black letters, "Return to rightful owner." The kitchen held the most of them. Mismatched mugs Claire had brought, insisting they were more modern than my old set. A blender Nathan bought me one Christmas and then used himself more than I ever did. They would all fit nicely into the second box. As I worked, the air shifted. Light footsteps padded into the kitchen. "Grandma?" I turned to see Lily, still in her pajamas, hair a little messy, rubbing her eyes. She looked from the boxes to me. "What are you doing?" "I'm packing some things," I said gently. Her gaze lingered on the bold black letters across the tape. "Return to rightful owner? Are you moving?" I crouched so I could look her in the eyes. "Not moving the way you think. I'm giving back what isn't mine to keep." She frowned. "But where will you go?" I smiled. "Somewhere the air smells of salt, and the waves sound like they're telling secrets." Her eyes widened a little. "The beach?" "Yes," I said. "A place your grandfather loved. We used to watch the gulls together and drink tea on the porch." Lily's small fingers fiddled with the hem of her pajama top. "Will I still see you?" "I hope so," I said honestly, "but I need to be somewhere I can breathe again." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Can I help you pack?" I shook my head. "Not this time. This is something I have to do myself, but..." I reached for the top shelf and brought down a small tin. "You can help me with this. Keep it safe until I see you next." She took it, holding it with both hands. "What's inside?" "Tea leaves," I said with a wink, "for when we have our next cup together." Her smile was small but warm. She tucked the tin under her arm like a secret. I finished the last box while she sat at the table, swinging her feet. The rhythm of the tape as it tore was steady, almost soothing. When it was done, I stacked the boxes by the door, ready for the courier to collect in the afternoon. As I washed my hands at the sink, Lily spoke softly. "Grandma, I think the beach will like you." I turned, drying my hands. "Why's that?" She shrugged. "Because you listen to things, like waves and people." The knot in my chest loosened just a little. "That's a good reason," I said. After she left to find her parents, I stood by the boxes for a moment. They looked ordinary, just cardboard, tape, and marker. But they were more than that. They were boundaries, sealed and labeled. Proof that not everything given is meant to be kept. I opened the back door and let in a stream of cool morning air. Somewhere far off, I imagined the cry of a gull, sharp and free. Soon, I thought. Soon I'll follow that sound. I glanced once more at the blue-rimmed cup on the counter, waiting beside my packed suitcase. My hand rested on its handle, and I whispered, "It's time." And with that, I was ready. The meeting with Margaret that morning was brief, but it carried the weight of years' worth of decisions. We sat at her mahogany desk, sunlight spilling across the polished surface, illuminating the neat stack of documents in front of her. "Everything's in order," she said, sliding the top sheet toward me. "The main property is now officially under a trust, one you control entirely. No one can touch it without your say." Her voice was calm, almost casual, but I caught the glint in her eyes. She understood what this meant for me. The house by the ocean wasn't just real estate. It was freedom, security, and the last piece of Samuel's love that remained untouched by the greed swirling around me. I signed where she indicated, my hand steady. Each pen stroke felt like closing a door I had no intention of reopening. The trust was ironclad, insulated from any family interventions. Margaret had made sure of that. "You'll be the sole trustee," she continued, placing the final document into a folder. "If Nathan or Claire ever inquire, you're under no obligation to explain anything. The trust exists to serve you, not them." I nodded. That's exactly what Samuel would have wanted. Margaret leaned back slightly. "And what do you want, Sylvia?" It was a simple question, yet it struck me harder than any of Nathan's veiled threats. What did I want? Not just in terms of assets or safety, but in life. I thought of the salty air in Maine, the sound of gulls wheeling overhead, the porch where Samuel and I once drank tea as the tide rolled in. "I want to hear the ocean every morning," I said quietly. "And I want to live without waiting for the next knock on the door." She smiled faintly. "Then we'll make sure you get that." We finished the formalities, and she handed me the folder along with a firm handshake. "Remember, Sylvia, quiet moves are the ones that last." By the time I stepped out into the crisp air, the weight on my shoulders had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it had changed. Now it was the weight of anticipation, not dread. I walked straight to the small cafe on the corner. I ordered my usual tea but barely touched it, my mind already racing ahead. Across the street, the travel agency's display caught my eye. A poster of a rugged Maine coastline, waves crashing against granite cliffs. It was almost too perfect, like the world was nudging me forward. Inside, the agency smelled faintly of paper and printer ink. A young man at the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "I need a one-way ticket to Portland, Maine." He tapped at his keyboard. "Departure date?" "As soon as possible," I replied. He clicked through a few options before turning the screen toward me. "There's a flight this Friday. Morning departure. Minimal layover." "That one," I said, without hesitation. He took my information, printed the ticket, and slid it across the counter. The paper felt warm from the printer. I folded it carefully and placed it inside my wallet, behind the photograph of Samuel that I kept tucked there. "You visiting family?" the young man asked politely. I smiled faintly. "Something like that." Back outside, the afternoon light had softened, casting long shadows along the sidewalk. I didn't tell Nathan. I didn't tell Claire. Even Lily, sweet as she was, would only know when she found the tin of tea waiting for her one morning with a note. I wasn't running away, not in the sense they might imagine. This was not retreat. It was relocation on my own terms. That night, I stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the garden Samuel and I had tended for years. My suitcase sat in the corner, still open, half packed with essentials. The blue-rimmed teacup, a thick sweater, a scarf that still carried the faint scent of sea air from our last trip north. On the table lay the folder Margaret had given me, its edges perfectly aligned with the grain of the wood. Inside was everything I needed to protect what was mine, and to start again where the horizon met the water. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving the room in shadow. The ticket in my wallet felt almost like a heartbeat, steady and sure. Friday would come soon enough, and when it did, I'd be ready to leave without looking back. Lily arrived in the late afternoon, the sky outside a soft watercolor of fading blues and golds. I heard her light knock before she even called out, "Grandma, it's me." When I opened the door, she was holding a small wicker basket, the handle wrapped with a strip of red ribbon. The scent hit me before I even looked inside. Fresh apples, cool from the autumn air. She grinned. "I picked them this morning. Thought you might like these." For a moment, I just stared. The gesture was so familiar, it tugged at something deep inside me. Samuel used to do the same every fall, coming back from the orchard with a basket in one hand, a sly smile in the other. He'd set them on the counter and say, "Best ones go to the best girl." "Come in, sweetheart," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. She stepped inside, kicking off her sneakers at the door. "I didn't know if you'd be home, but I thought I should come see you." Her eyes scanned the kitchen, maybe noticing the little changes. Some shelves looking barer, a suitcase half hidden by the dining table. She didn't ask. Instead, she set the basket down gently on the counter and unwrapped the ribbon, letting it curl into her palm. "They're beautiful," I said, lifting one of the apples to my nose. The crisp scent made me think of open fields and Samuel's laugh. "You know, your grandpa used to bring me apples just like this." She smiled, but there was a touch of sadness there. "Dad doesn't really talk about it much." I nodded, slowly. "I know. Sometimes people don't talk about what they miss the most." I walked over to the china cabinet and opened the glass door. Inside, my blue-rimmed teacup sat on its little saucer, perfectly clean, waiting. I took it out, holding it carefully in both hands. The porcelain felt warm despite the cool air, as if it carried its own memory. "Here," I said, turning toward her. She blinked, hesitant. "Grandma, that's your favorite cup." "It is," I agreed. "And I want you to have it." Her brows knit together. "Why?" I stepped closer, placing it gently in her hands. "Because there are some things in life no one should be allowed to take from you. Not even the people you love. This cup is one of mine, and now it's one of yours." She looked down at it, running a finger along the faded blue rim. "I'll keep it safe. I promise." "I know you will," I said, my throat tightening. She set the cup back in its saucer and, without another word, wrapped her arms around me. I held her close, my chin resting lightly on her hair. It smelled faintly of apples and something floral, like the shampoo she'd used since she was a child. We stayed like that longer than usual. There was no rush in the embrace, no polite release after a few seconds. It was the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. a quiet acknowledgement that something was shifting, that this moment might have to carry us through a long absence. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were brighter, though she didn't cry. "Will I see you next week?" she asked. I smiled faintly, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "We'll see each other again, Lily, and when we do, it'll be somewhere with the smell of salt in the air." She tilted her head, puzzled but too kind to press. "Okay." I walked her to the door, the basket of apples still on the counter behind us. As she slipped on her sneakers, she glanced back at the kitchen. "Grandma, you'll be okay, right?" I opened the door and let in the cool breeze. "I will," I said simply, "and so will you." She gave me one last look before heading down the walkway, the setting sun catching the gold in her hair. I stood there until she turned the corner, the blue-rimmed cup now safely tucked away in her bag. When I closed the door, the house felt different. Not emptier, but quieter in a way that didn't hurt. I picked up one of the apples, turning it in my palm. Samuel's voice echoed faintly in my mind, warm and certain. "Best ones go to the best girl." This time, I knew exactly who that was.